Good morning. Welcome to Blacklogic. President Trump's second term is off to a very rocky start, with approval ratings hitting historic lows. A recent Pew Research poll indicates a 40% approval rating. That is mirroring his first term, but trailing behind predecessors like Reagan and Obama at this juncture. Economic concerns, particularly around tariffs and government cuts, are at the forefront of public disaster. What are you guys' thoughts on President Trump's first 100 days when it comes to the trade war, the mass onslaught of deportations of illegal immigrants? There's so much going on in news today when it encompasses our political atmosphere. Here's some things I want you guys to take away from this. And if I can spin this up for you guys, again, we're having a couple of technical difficulties early on, but nonetheless, I'm going to continue to rock on with the news and your news updates. President Trump, in his first 100 days, has probably done more than 3 to 4 presidents combined. Some people are even saying 10 presidents combined. As Canadians head to the polls, U.S. President Trump's aggressive trade policies and remarks about annexing Canada have stirred nationalistic sentiments. Prime Minister Mark Carney's Liberal Party is experiencing a surge in support, which is going to position him in the election and as a stand against foreign interference. This is important because as Canadians head to the polls today, their response to the U.S. president, our president, President Donald Trump, and his aggressive trade policy, it really hangs in the balance for all Canadians. Now, the election, when it comes to Canada, pits two contrasting visions. You have the conservative leader Pierre Poilievre and the assertive economic nationalism versus liberal Prime Minister Mark Carney's strategic sovereignty-focused approach. Now, Pierre, who's the conservative in this political standoff, often linked to Trump for his populist rhetoric, has taken a firm stance against U.S. tariffs. He proposes a Canadian first strategy, emphasizing economic independence and retaliatory measures. Poilievre has pledged to, and here's some of the things he's going to do, supposedly, if he wins this election against Mark Carney: implement retaliatory tariffs against U.S. goods to counteract Trump's measures, negotiate a mutual tariff removal deal with the U.S. aiming for fair trade terms, promote Canadian energy export, mostly in LNG, to diversify trade partners beyond the U.S. So again, bringing in other countries to exercise and ostracize Americans altogether out of these trade deals when it comes to gas and energy. Reduce reliance on U.S. markets by strengthening interprovincial trade within Canada, meaning encouraging and empowering Canadian businessmen to, again, foster trade deals throughout the world rather than focus and rely on Americans to, again, the void that they have in Canada is that America is their next door neighbors. We're the next door neighbors. And when they're trying to shop around the world, import export tax, shipping, they're going to have a lot more issues because of where they're geographically located versus America. We have all these things. We have trade deals. We have thousands of trade deals with hundreds of countries. So it's more beneficial for Canada to broker a deal with America because we're going to incur a lot of the cost that Canadians will not. So now that they're trying to box out America, which is, it may hurt us a little bit economically, but not so significantly, because again, we are the world's largest consumers. We are the world's largest trade partners when it comes to all these other countries. Now, when it comes to Pierre, the conservative, his approach is confrontational because it resonates with voters seeking a very robust defense of Canadian economic interests. But critics argue that his alignment with a lot of the Trump tactics could strain diplomatic relations and economic stability. I can tell you right now that Mark Carney, he's already the front runner when it comes to this particular race. Now, if you guys are not familiar with Mark Carney, he is a former central banker with a reputation for steady leadership. And this is kind of the reports out of Canada, which has framed the election as a defense of Canadian sovereignty. Now, in response to Trump's tariffs and annexation rhetoric, these are some of the things that Carney had, to say and put forth. He stated that he's going to maintain retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods, signaling a firm stance against economic coercion. He's going to unveil a comprehensive plan to Trump-proof Canada. I don't know how you're going to Trump-proof Canada. That's going to be exciting to see. That's going to be very interesting to see. Including, and this is in Canadian dollars, a $31 billion in military spending to bolster national defense and meet NATO commitments ahead of schedule. He pledges to diversify Canada's trade relationships, reducing dependence on the U.S. by seeking new international partnerships. This is kind of basically the same thing that Pierre is going to do. Also, Carney is going to emphasize the importance of upholding international trade rules and Canadian values on the global stage. Now, Carney's measures approach appeals to voters concerned about maintaining stability and Canada's international reputation, and his focus on strategic autonomy aims to protect Canada's long-term interests without escalating tensions unnecessarily. Now, excuse me as I'm a bit under the weather. The voice changed, a lot of pauses here and there, but bear with me. I'm going to give you guys the news updates. If you're new to Blacklogic, please hit the subscribe button as well as the notification bell so you're notified every time I release a video or go live. But I just wanted to kind of give you a comprehensive breakdown when it comes to the political battle between Pierre and Mark Carney of Canada and how that may or may not affect some of the trade dealings that we have when it comes to the Trump administration, the U.S., and economics altogether. I think these are all imperative to note because down the line, this could either strengthen U.S. ties between Canada because they will come to the table and broker a better deal, or this may further weaken the relationships that that's already kind of on the brink between Canada and America as well. Now, in a recent statement, President Trump suggested that Ukrainian President Zelensky might be willing to relinquish Crimea to Russia as part of a peace deal. So again, giving Russia a part of Ukraine, making Ukraine a lot smaller, making Russia a lot bigger. And this assertion contradicts Ukraine's firm stance on retaining its territorial integrity. And it definitely is highlighting tensions in international diplomacy because this is what Putin essentially wants. He wants Ukraine to bend the knee so he can gain a larger foothold in Ukraine and slowly but surely taking Ukraine by force with the public appeal of a peace treaty or a truce. Because with that being said, President Putin has announced a temporary ceasefire in Ukraine from May 8th, to May 8th to May 10th to commemorate Victory Day. And if you guys are not familiar with Victory Day, this is basically how the Russians conquered the Germans. So that is in celebration and reflection of that. But while this is framed as a humanitarian gesture, the move is met with skepticism, and amid ongoing hostilities. Please excuse me as I'm a little bit under the weather. So bear with me. I do appreciate your patience. But I do want you guys to hear a bit of this story from these reporters here. Bear with me.
Launching a series of strikes across Ukraine just hours after the surprise meeting between President Trump and President Zelensky at the Pope's funeral. ABC News has learned President Trump requested that meeting as the White House continues to press all sides for a peace deal. ABC's Marcus Moore reports.
Tonight, we are learning more about that one-on-one surprise meeting between President Trump and Ukraine's President Zelensky that took place at the Vatican minutes before funeral services for Pope Francis. Zelensky responding to questions about how it went.
That's really, we had productive meeting.
That 15-minute meeting, a far cry from their last face-to-face exchange in the Oval Office in February.
You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having
Not playing
cards.
cards.
Right now, you don't.
Very
Yeah, you're
serious,
playing cards.
Mr. President.
You're
I'm
playing
very
cards.
serious.
You're
I'm
gambling
the
with the
president
lives
in
of
war.
millions of people.
You think-
You're gambling with World War III.
President Trump also saying Saturday's meeting went well. And ABC News has learned that he requested it. The president now hitting out at Russian President Vladimir Putin, saying there is, quote, no reason for Putin to be shooting missiles into civilian areas, cities, and towns, but continuing to pressure Ukraine to accept a peace deal that.
This really makes me think of some of the first impressions or the lasting relationship that President Trump has had with Putin. From his first term to now his second term. At one point in time, Putin could be trusted. He had great respect for President Trump, but it seems as though Putin no longer has that same respect, that their relationship is now fractured because he lied to Trump. And even though Trump hasn't publicly stated that, but he lied to Trump. And he played Trump as a fool. And Trump is stating he has no idea why he's, shooting missiles in civilian areas, because he's trying to take over Ukraine. He's trying to conquer Ukraine. And President Zelensky told Trump, and again, as information between these three juggernauts, these two juggernauts, Russia and the US, and the support and defense of Ukraine, we're dealing with a very vital and delicate dynamic because of the history between Ukraine and Russia and the history of Putin and some of the actions and words that doesn't really align with what's occurring today. I believe what the Trump administration have to understand is we might want to start leaning in on Zelensky and the history that he have with President Putin, and not just, the two men themselves, but their country's vast history and the ongoing conflict between the two. What's the history? How did we get here, and how do we move forward? Because again, we're questioning things that these two countries at war, and really, when we look at Russia, is Russia under NATO? Is Russia under any partnerships or agreements? Are they adhere to the Geneva Convention? Because if not, Russia can do whatever they want to do when it comes to trying to conquer Ukraine. Now, as I stated before, during May 8th to May 10th, they're going to do a temporary truce, a temporary ceasefire in reflection of Victory Day against their win against the Nazis. But other than that, the war is full on. The war is full blown. And here's where America is concerned. Either we're going to allow EU nations to step in and support, whether it be military resources strategies or diplomacy and talks of ceasefires and peace treaties, or we're going to help Ukraine. I mean, don't get me wrong. We've already forked over billions and billions and billions of dollars in support of Ukraine. And that is why Ukraine have not been conquered and taken over by Russia just yet, because the massive amount of support that they receive from the US government. So I believe that President Trump has a decision to make. Either you're going to continue the support of Ukraine and denounce Russia, which he has yet to do, or you're just going to take a step back and encourage EU nations to support Ukraine when it comes to military resources, humanitarian aid, peace negotiations, diplomacy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And if you're not going to do you have to do one of the two. Because at first he tried to play both sides to a certain degree, where he thought he could end the war, in a day or a week. And he has not. Okay. And again, presidents make a lot of promises. They speak very emphatically. They speak very directly, especially especially Donald Trump. He's probably one of the most direct speaking presidents of our time, instead of a lot of political hearsay, political side talk. But he has not come through with this promise. And again, I don't believe any U.S. president will ever fulfill all their promises. But this is one of the ones that Americans really wanted because we were forking over billions of American U.S. tax dollars. So
It forces them to give up land that Russia has seized since its invasion, as well as Crimea that it annexed in 2014. With President Trump promised on the campaign trail to end the war in Ukraine on day one of his presidency, but as he approaches his 100th day in the White House, peace remains elusive. With
Marcus, more for us.
all right, so that's pretty much it. And this is nothing new to the world stage, the constant conflicts between Ukraine and Russia. So we're going to see how that unfolds, and I'll make sure to keep you guys updated as well. And here's some breaking news. In a surprising development, Putin expressed gratitude. You guys see this picture here? Putin has expressed gratitude to North Korea for sending troops to support Russian forces in Ukraine. And this particular acknowledgement raises concerns about the expanding alliances in the conflict and the potential for further escalations. Now, of course, North Korea has a buy-in in sending troops because they are in dire need of Russian oil, Russian gas, because of their close off country for a very long time. They only really deal with China and Russia, and Russia. Don't forget, Russia is in partnership with a lot of African countries, so they have access to resources. Those resources can be transported to North Korea. So again, when it comes to North Korea, Russia is a very, very powerful ally. And I think if any of us was in that situation, not stating that we ever be North Korean or be a dictator, I'm not stating that, but I want you to look at it from the perspective of the North Korean president, President Kim here that you see in the picture, that by sending troops to help Russia in its fight against Ukraine, because Ukraine has support from EU nations as well as America, this is a partnership. This is a ally long term that North Korea can benefit from when it comes to, resources, food, military equipment, resources from Africa, because all the partnerships that Russia have in Africa and other countries around the world, because they're just sitting on trillion tons of oil and natural gas. So that is why when we look at Russia, China, and America, the three juggernauts, the three powerhouses with the three largest GDPs, is because the same countries in Europe that was hating on Russia, that doesn't like to do business with Russia, was solely getting a majority of their oil and their energy and their gas from Russia. Because people are trying to really understand, how is Russia so powerful if nobody likes Russia, but everybody's doing business with Russia? Now, in the turn of events, Siana Ward, a 50-year-old Irish national and long-term U.S. resident, was detained by ICE upon returning from Ireland, where she visited her ailing father. Despite holding a green card for over 30 years, past legal issues have led to her detention, sparking debates on immigration enforcement. No one is safe. No one is safe. It doesn't matter where you're from, because a lot of people from the left and the right were stating that this is one-sided. This is solely some sort of campaign to deport Hispanics from America. But as more news stories come to light, as more news stories hit mass media, we're seeing that everybody, no matter how they look, no matter what race, Donald Trump is trying to expel, trying to deport, and he's using every resource at his position to eradicate illegal immigrants from our country. So if you're white from Ireland, you have legal issues, your green card is not intact, maybe it's expired, you overstayed your welcome. It's time for you to either one, renew it, or go back to Ireland. It doesn't matter what country you're from, and we need to see more of this, because I know that a lot of Hispanics and Latinos believe that this was a targeted attack from the Trump administration because of their ethnicity, to a certain degree. But again, we have a lot of Latino and Hispanic countries that entered the southern U.S. border illegally. But again, as I stated before, illegal immigrants come to America from all around the world: Europe, Asia, Africa, the Caribbean, Latin America, Central America, South America, etc. And now that we're seeing more reports that everyone is being treated the same, either the tensions between the races or the rhetoric that we see that is only one-sided when it comes to deportation of illegal immigrants, either that is going to subside or is going to worsen. That is my conjecture on that piece. And reports have emerged of U.S. citizens' children being deported to Honduras with their mothers, with their madre. One case involves a 4-year-old with cancer who was deported without access to necessary medical care. And these incidents have ignited discussions on the rights of citizen children and the implication of strict immigration policies. I wonder what's the legality in this? Because if you read this article, it stated that 3 children who are U.S. citizens were deported to Honduras with their mother last week, including a 4-year-old receiving treatment for metastatic cancer, according to families, attorneys, and civil rights and immigration advocacy organizations. In one case, a mother was deported with a 2-year-old, while others involved another mother deported with 4 and 7-year-olds. And the American Civil Liberties Union and the National Immigration Project, among other organizations, said in a news release Friday. What they're trying to do here, let me just read this last one. All were detained when the women attended routine meetings with officials in Louisiana as part of the Intensive Supervision Appearance Program, or ISAP, according to attorneys and court records. Taken together, the family's advocates say their removals from the U.S. underscores concerns about a lack of due process amid the Trump administration immigration crackdown. And what's important about this, you guys remember Obama passing legislation to reunite families, but they were using their children as anchor babies and tether babies to stay inside of the U.S. What you see now is the reversal of that. The mothers and fathers of a lot of these U.S. citizen kids, because they were born here, first they were brought here in the bellies of these women, and sometimes prematurely, and they were born in the U.S., thus making them U.S. citizens. So some of the legislation that Obama passed, with the reinforcement of Biden, kept a lot of these illegal parents inside of America with their legal children, according to the Constitution. So people were talking about keeping families together. What seems to be, when I hear, especially from the left, that they're trying to keep families together here in America versus returning the children to their parents who are illegal. So which one which one has a higher priority? Now, if the parents are illegal, shouldn't you be returning the children to their parents, to their native countries, versus trying to keep them here illegally and trying to get their citizenship because their kids are citizens? Yeah, it's a very complex dynamic, because these are children. These are not adults. I think the situation would be a little bit different if they were. It's something that I would definitely keep attention and keep you guys updated and abreast on. But I do want to know your reaction on this particular piece of history that a lot of people, especially Black Americans, probably wasn't even aware of.
Black Americans turned their backs against the U.S. and fought alongside the Filipino resistance during the Philippine-American War. If caught, these soldiers were deemed as traitors by the U.S. and then hanged in public. These Black soldiers couldn't justify their participation in the possibility of Philippines and the rest of Asia being subject to the same invasion, slavery, and destruction that was placed among them and the Native Americans in the U.S. They feared that the same thing would happen to Philippines, and they couldn't stand it. it. One of these brave soldiers was Captain David Fagan, who was a highly skilled guerrilla officer. He led 8 military operations, which helped temporarily give Philippines an advantage in the war, but we know how it turned out. US deemed him as a traitor and put a 600 bounty on his head, but he was never found. Dehumanizing tactics used on Black Americans were also exported to the Philippines during the American colonial period. They deemed Filipinos as the N-words of Asia. Because of this, the US embedded anti-Blackness and colorism within Filipino society and culture to destabilize and keep Filipinos and the small Black population there divided. The US actually left Philippines in a worse situation than Spain ever did, and their kill count was a lot higher, but that's a conversation for another day. It is Black History Month, and one other way that they are related is that the Spanish also brought enslaved Africans over to the Philippines during their colonial period. Happy Black History Month, and thank you to our Black allies. Just wanted to highlight how Filipino history and Black history actually are related.